It was a cloudy morning in the heart of Ouagadougou. The grey clouds hung heavy over the city as if they sensed the weight of an ancient secret. Amid the hustle and bustle of the administrative centre, a man walked slowly, with firm but discreet steps. He was wearing a simple cotton shirt, worn pants, and a dirty cap that hid part of his face. His gaze was calm and observant. He did not attract attention. He seemed like just another one among many. No one knew his name. To the security guards at the main entrance to the military building, he was just another civilian. One of those who, by mistake or daring, dare to get too close to the centers of power. He passed through the first gate without resistance. The second, however, required identification. That was when the stairs began to grow heavy, and whispers arose among the soldiers. One of the young guards, only 2 months into his service, approached suspiciously. "You can't come in here," he said in a harsh but uncertain voice. The stranger did not answer. He simply handed over a small, folded, almost crumpled piece of paper with something written by hand. The guard frowned, read it, but did not understand. He called his superior, who soon appeared with long strides, an aggressive tone, and eyes accustomed to giving orders. The man remained motionless, like a rock in a storm. The superior did not even look him in the eye. "Another peasant trying to make himself important," he muttered, handing the paper back with disdain. At that moment, no one knew that they were about to make the biggest mistake of their careers, disrespecting the most dangerous figure on the continent, precisely because of his humility. The commander of the outpost, a middle-aged man with a look hardened by decades in uniform, approached the visitor with an air of superiority. Without asking for an explanation, he took the paper from his hand abruptly and examined it over his shoulder, as if he were dealing with a common homeless person. "Documents like this have no value here. They're just archive trash," he said, crumpling the paper slowly between his fingers and throwing it to the floor with contempt. Some soldiers around him laughed, trying to hide their tension with muffled jeers. One of them whispered, "He should be selling vegetables, not walking around here." Another added, "Those country folk think they know something." The man remained silent. His eyes didn't react. His expression didn't change. There was such a steady calm on his face that paradoxically it was more annoying than a direct answer. He simply bent down, picked up the paper carefully from the floor, and put it back in his pocket. At that moment, the colonel, who had been watching the scene from inside the main building, decided to intervene. "Bring this guy here. I want to see what this theater means." His voice echoed through the corridors like thunder laden with arrogance. And so, without honor, without permission, and without a shred of dignity, the man was escorted inside. But not with respect, but with mockery. Fate seemed to laugh at the irony about to unfold. Inside the meeting room, the air was heavy. Generals, advisors, and high-ranking officers were meeting to discuss something delicate. Newly discovered information about secret colonial documents that could shake the entire narrative imposed by Europe on the history of West Africa. Little did they know that the man humiliated at the gate was the bearer of the truth that many had tried to bury. What's more, he was the very symbol of the new African era, an era that was dawning at that very moment, even if still shrouded in disrespect. Minutes later, the door to the meeting room creaked open heavily. The man entered, escorted by 2 soldiers, still with a calm look, as if he knew exactly what was coming. The officers seated around a dark wooden table turned their heads almost at the same time. One of them muttered impatiently, "Who is—" "Oh, that. Has the janitor got lost?" The room filled with dry, fake laughter, but soon everything fell silent. Suddenly the chief of staff of the presidency, an austere man who was always punctual, entered with hurried steps and a tense face. He looked around, ignored the officers, and fixed his eyes on the stranger. He stopped. He took a deep breath. Then, with his voice choked with shock, he said loudly, "Your Excellency, forgive us. We didn't know you had already arrived." The laughter died down. The eyes widened. The general who had insulted him at the gate visibly paled. One of the young lieutenants, in a panic, dropped the papers he was holding. The colonel, sweating cold, tried to compose himself, but it was too late. Everyone was now standing. The man then calmly removed his cap, revealing the face known only to those who truly follow the profound transformations of the continent. Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of the new African Revolution, the same man who faced colonial powers, overthrew oppressive systems, and rekindled the ancestral pride of the people. Traoré did not shout. He didn't accuse anyone. He simply walked over to the main table, slowly pulled out the same paper that had been discarded, and placed it on the table. "This is the document you've been discussing so much, the original. And no, it wasn't in any European safe. I had it with me, because there are truths that don't belong in archives. They belong to the people's memory." The silence that followed was more thunderous than any speech. The colonel who had crumpled the document sat down slowly, as if the floor itself had stopped supporting his pride. His eyes avoided Traoré's, but the weight of his humiliation was visible, even to those who said nothing. The young gate guard, now standing next to the door, had a red face, his hands trembling. He couldn't decide whether to ask for forgiveness or disappear from there forever. The laughter from a few minutes ago had become a poison that now burned. In silence, some officers tried to hide their discomfort by looking at the floor or pretending to rummage through useless papers. The older general, previously impassive, slowly closed his eyes. He knew what that meant. It wasn't just a formality. It was a reflection of a still colonized mentality where appearance commanded respect and social origin still carried more weight than merit or truth. The document in question was more than just old paper. It was a fragment of the African soul, which many had learned to despise without understanding. Meanwhile, Traoré watched them in silence, not with anger, but with disappointment. His gaze did not convey hatred, but a kind of deep sadness, like someone who sees their own house treated like a ruin by those who should be defending it. The silence stretched on, uncomfortable. No one dared to speak. No title or rank now protected those who had been judged by their appearance, their skin tone, their humble origins. The true power here did not come from insignia, but from truth, courage, and memory. It was then that one of the lieutenants, the youngest in the room, stepped forward. Visibly moved, he bowed briefly with tears in his eyes. "Forgive us. We have forgotten how to recognize a true leader. We have forgotten how to listen." The phrase broke the ice, but the discomfort did not cease, because the shame there did not come from a logistical error, but from a gaping moral abyss. And there, before Traoré, everyone felt for the first time what it means to be naked before history. Traoré remained standing before the table, his hands firmly on the document they had so despised. His face revealed neither vanity nor wounded pride. It revealed only the serenity of someone carrying a mission greater than himself. He looked around, one by one, as if he wanted to engrave in the eyes of each man there the lesson that fate had taught them. No words of revenge, no humiliation. Returned only dignity. "I'm not here for myself," he said in a calm, measured voice. "I am here for those who have been silenced, for those who have been called nothing, for those who have been erased from the books, but who live on in the earth, in blood and in memory." No one responded. Some were in tears. Others were still, digesting the blow of the truth. And at that moment, everyone understood. Real power does not dress in gold, does not arrive in armored cars, does not shout orders. It imposes itself through truth and morality. Traoré then turned to leave. He left the original document on the table, as if planting a seed. "Keep this safe, but do not leave it locked away. Knowledge liberates, and what liberates can no longer be hidden." His footsteps echoed through the corridor like an ancient drum. Each beat was a call to conscience, a living reminder that respect is not demanded. It is earned with history, with truth, with silent firmness. As he left the building, there was no military escort. There was no fanfare. There were only the people outside, waiting for him, as if they knew, as if they felt. And when they saw him leave, erect and calm, they made way in silence, with their fists raised and their hearts aflame. The rebirth of Africa would not come with speeches. It would come with actions, with memory, with justice done with dignity. And there, on that day, a new page was written, not with words, but with attitude. Years before that moment in the barracks, the document in question slept in deep silence inside a rusty safe, in an old French military archive, marked Special, Classification, Level Red. It was a colonial dossier, but different from the others. In it, there were not only maps. Among the pages, one in particular stood out, the one that recounted the origins of a peasant family from Burkina Faso, described as a potential threat to the European narrative. That family, the report said, was a direct descendant of warrior kings who resisted French rule in the 19th century. Royal blood, deliberately hidden. Traoré was one of them. But his lineage was deliberately suppressed in the records to prevent a new, legitimate leader from emerging from the ashes of colonialism. The document also included handwritten notes by a former French officer who warned, if this information comes to light, the legitimacy of the European presence in Africa will collapse. We must silence them before they discover who they are. This was not just an archive. It was a written confession, a map to Africa's lost memory. And Traoré found it, not by chance, but because he was looking, because he knew his mission went beyond the present. It was to rescue the stolen past. For years he hid the document, studied every line, confirmed every fact, with elders, local leaders, and cross-referenced archives in different African countries. When he was finally certain of its veracity, he did not reveal it immediately. He waited. He knew that the right moment would come, not only to show it, but to use it as living proof that the reconstruction of Africa would begin with the recovery of its truth. That truth, buried for centuries, was now about to become the seed of a moral revolution. After the revelation in the barracks, the forbidden document was carefully digitized and distributed to military academies, universities, and cultural centers throughout the country. What followed was a wave of shock, but also of pride. Experienced officers, previously skeptical, began to review the historical record with new eyes. In the classrooms of military schools, the name Traoré was no longer just that of a revolutionary captain, but of an heir to a 1,000-year-old resistance whose roots had been deliberately hidden. On the streets, the impact was even more intense. The common people, accustomed to seeing their history told through the eyes of the colonizer, began to see themselves as descendants of empires, of kings and queens, of wise men and warriors. The youth, in particular, embraced the new symbol with fervor. Traoré's face graced T-shirts, murals and songs, but not as a politician. As a reminder that truth, once set free, has the power to rebuild entire nations. The soldiers who had once scoffed now asked to be part of the new National Guard, a force no longer to protect elites, but to protect African truth. Military hierarchies were revised, and many officers were asked to restudy the history of their own people as a condition of continuing to serve. It was a quiet rebirth, without gunfire, but with an earthquake-like impact. Because what had been revealed was not just about Traoré, it was about all of them. While the international media reacted with skepticism or tried to minimize the event, the African people understood that yellowed paper had unearthed more than an origin. It had rekindled the collective memory, and when a people remembers who they are again, they become unstoppable. At that moment, it was no longer just a question of politics or territory. It was the spiritual reconstruction of an entire continent. Time passed, but that day in the barracks was marked as a turning point, not only for revealing a document, nor for exposing the ignorance of high-ranking officers, but because a new paradigm was born there, that of an Africa that no longer expects to be respected. It asserts itself with truth, dignity, and memory. Traoré continued to govern with simplicity, refusing to use palaces or colonial symbols. His true throne was the beaten earth where the people walked, his shield, the rescued history. In one of his last public appearances that year, before thousands of young people, he said, "I did not inherit an empire. I inherited an open wound, and my mission is to heal it with truth. Freedom begins when we know who we are, and no one can tell us otherwise anymore." These words echoed beyond borders. From Senegal to Tanzania, from Guinea to South Africa, movements of young historians, community leaders, and former soldiers began to search through forgotten archives. Each piece of paper recovered was like gold, fragments of a collective soul that was breathing again. The legacy of that document, therefore, lay not only in its content, but in what it awakened. A new generation of Africans, no longer kneeling before powers, but standing tall, conscious, and bold. Africa was no longer a continent waiting to be saved, but a civilization reconnecting with its essence. The phrase, "They tried to destroy the document," became a symbol of resistance, and Traoré's response with his firm silence became a method. True justice does not need to shout, and so, with calm steps, the man who was humiliated at the door of a barracks became a symbol of a people who would never be humiliated again. Because as long as there is memory, there will be strength, and as long as there is truth, there will be rebirth. The rebirth of Africa did not begin with wars. It began with a role, a name, and a history that not even the fire of lies could extinguish.